there. Last time when I recorded the current update about Macro Micro VR service, it got more than 45,000 views. That is crazy and shows me that you're interested in this project. So I thought, okay, then why not telling you more about this exact project? It all began in 1919 already, and it was released a first version 0.1 for Patreons, and Blur did the website, the www.blurraven.fr/mmvs, and if you then use /download, then you'll also get all the builds that are up so far, because the policy is that the most current build is of course just for Patreons, but if a new build is out, then the last build is free for all. So in 1919 already, it begun with version 0.1, and as we can see, we just had a little scene in something that looks like a garage, and there were no sounds, and it was just the model of Talos. The program itself was not called Macro Micro VR Service back then, or MMVS in short. Back then it was named Talon service, but I think that Blur renamed it for 0.2 that came also out in that said year, because he wants to be open to add new characters in future, but that is definitely something for the more far future and not something for just yet. So the version 0.2 changed to a much more cozy environment. It was still just Talos sitting now on a bed, but you had a living room kinder with a nice lighting. But the hand orientation of the VR trackers was kinder very weird. You felt like holding sticks in your hand, and those sticks were your hands instead of your real hands. So that was definitely janky back then, but got quickly updated shortly after. Version 0.3 came out in December of 1919. And that brought much more in. It brought in that Talos was not longer static. So he could move around and interact, and also sounds were added when stuff is done. The overall animations were a bit more toony and more telegraphed and not so realistic, but definitely something. Interesting about this furry game was that back in these days, there was not much out there that was in such high quality. So now you had the full living room to roam around and find some little orbs to collect or little fun facts here and there. Finally, you had sounds, and you had squish effects when you get stepped on, the kinder gravel soil sounds when you rub the paws and stuff like that. And depending on where you were in the level, Talos would also kinder change his own position in that said level, and from there on he had more possibilities to interact with you. Still, one thing that was happening and that felt not very good was that you always had to teleport and not just freely go around. And for me, as a hardcore VR gamer, that was definitely hard thing. 0.31 was then out in January of 2020, and from then on, the version we all know was developed, 0.4. And to be honest, it took time until I found the first version a few years ago. Within the current build, there is also a nano soul level in which you can be not just like about 10 to 16 centimeters, but no, you can be 0.3 millimeters, what is a bit thicker than a hair would be. But it is so tiny you would kinda need 2 hours to walk all over a person that's laying. So while we in the background try in this nano level to walk all over Talos, I try to explain what changed over the years and, of course, what might be delivered in future. So the devlogs of Bleu started in April of 2021. This early devlog stated that Bleu added 6-sided animations for cobble movement in VR and footstep sounds. In May, he said that he brought in different VR hands and, of course, VR locomotion, what was so importantly planned for 0.4. Also, of course, Talos got new AI routines because there should be a new environment in which you could roam around then in future. In June of 2021, it was stated that there are already 250 different animations for Talos, and Bleu worked a bit on exterior design, so you could also just look out of a window. In July, he worked on a Stuck to Soul event and also a grab and carry system. In August, there was added mouse arm movements of Cobble, so that you could also just use it on desktop to move your hands when you, for example, give rubbies. And there were animations added around Talos' bed. In September, everything went a bit more high resolution because tessellation was deprecated back then in Unreal Engine, because everything was already was heading to Unreal Engine 5. He added plumbings and also the bathrooms. And in October, he finished the house and also implemented damage and dying. So if you fall, for example, from high shelves or get squished, then you could die. In November, there were added couch animations and a modification menu to change, for example, the skin of Cobble, giving different colors and stuff. Also, paw prints when dirty was added back then. And the last month of 2021, in December, was added the relationship system, and multiplayer finally worked. And the relationship system is that the more you do what Talos wants you to do, the more he likes you. And the more you're just hiding and running away, the more he hates you. And the more he likes you, the more probable it is to be handled carefully. And the more he hates you, of course, the more he just tries to end you. And then came 2022. In 2022, in January, there was added a VR spectator to capture, for example, an OBS. So on your screen would still run an instance of the game, showing it for the capture. There was also added a Game Master menu and some localization. Also new music and audio that we know today, and that, in my opinion, sounds a bit like a modern Sherlock Holmes soundtrack in the background. You saw the Sherlock Holmes movies like 10 years ago or so? I think that it really sounds close to that. The release, the final release of version 0.4 then was in February of 2022. I started and tested the game then, I guess it was in July of 2022. So what happened until then? So the 0.4, the big version number that has not changed to today, was out in February of 2022, 4 years ago. So it was the release of 0.4, and it of course contained some fixes and tweaks. You could now change the field of view. You had now teleportation points through which you could easier climb up stuff. Because if you're so tiny, of course, sometimes it's nearly impossible to get somewhere without those. And the overall dirt rub system got an overhaul, so how it reacts if you rub the paws. In March, this nano environment here was added, and also different VR controller bindings were added. In April of 2022, version 0.4.1 released. It added some kink options, so you could toggle stuff away you don't like. And an AI choice table for the Game Master was added. Also, the options were added to the main menu to have all teleports or invulnerability activated at start to quicker roam around or to get squished without any consequences. Sweat was added back then. And it was also added a system that makes the paw pads more flat to the ground by a shader dependent on the angle to the ground. In May of 2022, it was the jump from Unreal Engine 4 to Unreal Engine 5, so also Lumen and Nanite, but at first just for PC and not for VR. And it was also the moment in which many people kind of stuck to older releases, because the new jump to Unreal Engine 5 caused definitely a strong drop in performance, because Unreal Engine 5 was still super new and caused many problems. For testing the new functions of the new engine version, there was also added a Lumen test level in which you could just roam around through a kind of block out of a city environment, also with some Lumen shenanigans there, and you could have also, there was stuff to test, like the shoes that were added later, some furniture. But definitely don't use that level in VR if you're not on a strong graphics card, of course. Even with the 4070 Ti Super, it is super laggy for me, that level, and sometimes you could have like a few seconds of freeze on in some areas. Also, Steam's OpenVR was switched to OpenXR, what is a cross-platform API between the headset and PC, to be more free in possibilities for the future. Cobble got some Viseams, and Blur started working on the shoe. The shoe model then was implemented in June of 2022, and that was the whole devlog all about. In July, the moment when I finally found that game and uploaded a few Let's Play videos in which I collected the orbs, refined the rigs a bit, and the release of version 0.4.2 was delayed a bit because of the Unreal Engine switch problems, I would say. In August, the UI was refined, and in September, there was added a shoe put-on animation, so the shoes were finally usable. Version 0.4.2 was finally released, and Blur started to work on code modularity for future expansions. He kinda cut the overall game code more and more in small packages that were kinda delivering single informations to other packages that would work with them. So the whole refactoring of code definitely took much time. October was mostly a bug fixing month, and then in November, version 0.4.3 was released. In December, Blur was just working on code modularity again and a bit of debugging, and big UI fixes were made then, and 2023 started. So 2023 began with fusing some animation scripts and rigs of macro and microplayer. Also, a few leaning against wall animations were added. In February, the Game Master menu and behavior of Talos got some fixes, and in March, a few camera view tweaks were added. The VR hands were separated from the actor, so you had flying hands from there on. Otherwise, there were always very stretchy, bendy arms. In April, the overall AI hype made Blur to test some large language models to control Talos, and it kinda worked. The player hands were enhanced now that they were free, and also he reworked the motion blur, and an experimental path trace renderer was added. Since then, also a new main menu map was added. In May, the floor collisions were made a bit better, and it was done quite some alpha testing. In June, version 0.4.4 came out. The overall situation system got a rework in that one. The animations also were made a bit more smoother here and there. And there was a jump from DirectX 11 to 12, also full body 8K for VR, and Blur baked 11 hours on 3 PCs for the static lighting. So what is static lighting? In a game engine, you can kinda light up your scene and then tell the computer to bake that into information to have a more realistic and smoother and way more pretty lighting. But that, of course, is just working if there is no day-night circle or something that would overall change the lighting in your scene. In July of 2023, there were a few animations like nodding and head tilt added, and Blur worked on the CPU performance. A better toy car was added, and I think it was also the month that the test level was public. In August, the dynamic collisions were overworked, and the dirt system on surfaces via shader was enhanced. In September, version 0.4.4.3 was released, and it came with the rig optimization and also no fall damage anymore if you would land on pillows. October had some rig updates, and the macro was cut in parts for better LOD control, and of course functions and collisions. For example, something that is very far away doesn't need so good collision work than something that is right in front of your nose. So if you are a tiny, then the paws would have way better look and collisions than the head that is very far away for you from that angle. And because something was planned, the VOR update, Talos got a more rework. In November, there were a few automation tools for asset updates created, and in December, Talos got a whole digestive system with collisions. I read that it was made by Sandman. In 2024, it began in the January with some gut animations with the help of Torvid. This cheeky critter. I saw what the Bean was doing a few years earlier. You know, there were quite some games. You can Google yourself, Torvid. You should do that. So in February, the whole localization system was reworked. And of course, the player collision in the inner body sublevel of Talos was also tweaked. A cam proximity light was added so that you kind of always had a bit of light around you. And in March, the health system got reworked. Also, the overall grab system, to make it possible to grab more different things. Bleu created a Blender export tool. And HDR and vertical display support was added in March. In April, the new grab system was implemented, the IK was reworked, and some VR animation fixes were done. Also, the grab system got a little offset for VR, so it would also correct itself if it's always difficult. You could be standing, sitting, laying. It's not easy. In June of 2024, a slime system for the internals was added, and of course also for sweat could be reused for that. In July, Bleu tested a particle system-driven slime attempt and worked on the performance. So the overall slime and fluid system was about 4,000 times more performant after that. In August, it was worked on the deformation of the internal geometry and also on some extreme sizes, because who knows what will all come in future. And the player forces were also a topic of August of 2024. In September was a cleanup done. It was worked on the VR positionings and a better cam shake, and Bleu tested caustics in gastric fluids. Then finally, in October of 2024, version 0.4.5 was out. It was the big more animation overhaul, API changes for plugins, and finally, there was VOR in MMVS. In November, he reworked the rig a bit, worked on the animation sync. It was, by the way, now over 700 animations so far. And refactored the situation system. So the situation system is kinda like a tree. What Talos can do where and in which situation in the house. And in December he worked on way more animations for the new update. And then began last year, 2025. So in January, Bleu worked on the communication of the grab system with the VOR system and added more animations, and also started to shift more and more from blueprints to C++. So from visual coding to real coding. What also gives, of course, a bit of performance improvements. In February, Bleu worked on the connection of certain animations and of the parenting and offsets to those animations, and the toy car was refined because it kind of never worked. It always flipped over and was impossible to drive. But from then on, worked better. March was the month of testing animations and that the paws can push players smoothly. In April, better offsets for size differences were added, and of course, code refactoring! In May, the situation system was finally completely fixed, and the shoes now also could create own footprints. The damage system was refined, so that damage also was now reacting to the size difference, actually. And Blur tested some modding support for future and tested new avatars on his rig. June then brought way better perception to Talos, and that was definitely a big jump, because before he would just need to look a bit away and instantly would lose you. But now Talos could also kinda remember where he would have seen you last and would check there instead of just instantly giving up. That was definitely a big plus in immersion. The overall server performance was done way better back then, and the motion blur was tweaked. In July and August, the modularity of the animation layers and IK in communication with the Game Master menu was kind of the big point, so very technical here. And version 0.4.6 was out in September of 2025. The versioning was changed then, because 0.4.6.1 and .2 was shifted to version 0.4.7 and 0.4.8 to not have too long tails on those serial numbers. So going back to July of last year, the decision table was cleaned up and the pathfinding overall was refined. In August, the macro-macro player controller was reworked, and extreme scales were tested, like everything between 20 kilometers and 1 millimeter worked stable, but still way more extreme sizes were tested, and it worked. The kink filters that were added quite early a few years ago were killed, because there was now the decision table, and in the menu you have now also presets on start. Even if you're in VR, can still say stuff like no war or no crushing, just pause, whatever, so you have presets now. Yeah, in September, like I said, 0.4.6 came out. Toy Car got better physics, more extreme health ranges were tested, and in October, Blur tested around with Google Earth photogrammetry data and demolition systems to be able to crush Earth in future. That was also the month that the overall personality presets for the decision table were added. To damage scaling was finished back then and more optimization, and the gut sub-level got a performance boost of like 82%, which is quite much. And in November then, there were 2 little bug fix updates. The cam shake was now scaling, the toy car was tested in the cesium mod, but overall just the most crucial bugs were squished back then. And in December, the audio system rework started, what was not touched for about 3 years now. Blur tested multiple external audio solutions and started recording own sounds for different things to have a better audio in future, and of course adding the whole VOR audio that is still missing within Talos. So, but what is coming next? What is coming in the future? Plans that are already publicly announced and that will at some point, in whichever order done, will be an update of the overall house, for example, maybe nanite usage, a day-night circle, interactions like cooking, bathing, adding new characters, of course, many people want that, and maybe implementing LLM support to move Talos around. Minigames could be a thing, the rework of the nano level, more realism there, a photo mode, blood and gore of course, also very popular, better pause, VR support for the Game Master, a better toy car, smoother animations and a usable camera and monitor system on the desk, so that the monitor is indeed doing something, customizable key bindings or an X-ray view into Talos could all be a thing that Blur has on the list. So the next updates, 0.4.7 and 0.4.8, will kind of round up the overall VOR system, and then we are getting closer to 0.5. And that is a big change because since 4 years there was not such a big jump in the numbers. I think with the new scale possibilities, Bleu will definitely kinda soon rework the NanoSoul level. And also because of planned modability in future, there is a mod loader planned. And as I saw, Bleu already tested the mod loader with internal mods that are, of course, never part of the build that is publicly available because he's testing assets of friends and stuff. And will there be a game launcher at some point? Well, online servers, what would be definitely more convenient than to set up your own server on your computer and have to run it on your PC instead of just like click in the menu on a public game and create games directly on a server that is not your own computer, will be added not before the income of the overall project goes beyond $5,000 a month. But before tax, in 2025, it was already $5,200 a month. Before tax, though. So I guess just a little bit more, and it would even be enough income to be free from creating an own server, running an own server, and having people back and forth on your computer instead of just have a server that does all the shenanigans you usually don't want to break your cute head about. So when do we get version 0.5? Definitely it will take a year at least. And for 0.5 is planned to add a new environment and probably a new character. There was a Patreon poll about it. Possibilities were a Reno as a boss in an office, a female wolf soldier in a moving train, or a social media sassy kangaroo in a mountain cabin doing the streaming shenanigans. But that would just be added after camera and monitor support will be added. A lone athletic horse in doing sports on a ground park was an idea. Also a protogen rat thingy on a spaceship, or a lab rat in a laboratory. But yeah, I remember that poll, so version 0.5 will come with a new character and a new environment. But definitely not in 2026. If you dig through the website of Bleu, you find also some cheat codes for the game so that you can tweak a few things if you like. But we are going too deep and we digged enough today, I would say. I hope that this video catched your interest and shortened the time up to a new update, because the last video I did was just about the current update, and this video here kind of summarizes up everything, probably, that happened before, and a little bit of looking into the future. So we see ourselves again here if something new happened, I guess. Have fun!